Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on 3 New Year's resolutions for protecting your school district's social media in 2019. Today we'll be featuring Anil Chawla, who is the founder and CEO of Archive Social. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is on mute. Feel free, though, to go ahead and use the question function in your GoToWebinar control panel to submit questions. You can do that throughout the presentation, and if we don't get to your question, during the presentation, we'll get to it at the end, I promise. And then there will be time for Q&A throughout and at the end of the presentation, and the webinar is being recorded. So you'll receive a copy via email afterwards. So just to introduce our speaker, today we'll have Anil Chawla with us. And about Anil, he is the founder and CEO of Archive Social. He's a national speaker and subject matter expert on legal, policy, and records management issues related to social media and government. He speaks regularly about these topics around the country. He's been a featured presenter for the Center of Digital Education, for NSPRA, and for Neola. And he's really well-versed in topics related to social media, public records policies, and K-12 education. And just to tell you a little bit about Archive Social is the #1 provider of social media archiving for public agencies, and we protect more than 1,800 public agencies and districts around the country, ranging from the largest cities, New York City, Chicago, Dallas, to the smallest towns and school districts in more than 40 states. So today, we have an agenda, and the agenda will cover first the rising importance of social media in schools. Then we'll get into these 3 resolutions that your district can make. So resolution number 1, we'll talk a little bit about centralizing oversight. Resolution number 2, we'll talk about moderating comments safely. And then resolution number 3, we'll talk about fulfilling your public records responsibilities. And with each of these resolutions, we're going to go into a real story from one of our customers where they were able to put these resolutions in place and have success with it. So we've got Anil here, and we're really excited to hear him talk. Anil, welcome.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for the introduction there, and thank you all for joining us. For those of you who are dealing with freezing temperatures today, I hope you are finding a way to stay warm and hopefully can spend the rest of the 45 minutes with us, at least in a warm location. We are going to talk about these resolutions, as Stephanie pointed out, around this context of here we are in 2019, social media use in schools and school districts continues to grow. There are some really important items to be aware of, some important actions to take to benefit from social media and, of course, protect your district, protect your schools in the process. That's really the focus of today's presentation. And really my goal here is to give you not only the academic view of legal and policy requirements, but the real picture of what's happening in the space. And hopefully each and every one of you leaves today with at least one action item and or to do to kick off 2019 in the right way for your social media strategies to succeed and to continue to grow. And in that regards, again, please do use the questions box in your GoToWebinar console. A big part of our presentations here is to be a resource to you, to keep this interactive. We will have plenty of time at the end to address any questions that you have at all. And so with that, I want to get into this presentation around New Year's resolutions and really kick it off on the back of the value of social media, the importance of social media in school districts. And this is probably not surprising to any of you who have decided to join us today. Social media is front and center. It's here to stay in society as a whole, and more front and center, a primary channel as a business communication for your schools and school districts. Many of you probably at this point are already turning to Facebook and or Twitter or any other of the related sites to disseminate information as a primary channel, both planned information and certainly unexpected information. If there's a school closure, on the positive side, if something great happens with a staff member, or on the negative side, if there's some kind of threat or some kind of weather emergency, turning to social media as a first form of communication is becoming a habit. It's been this way in the public sector for a while, and certainly we're seeing this take off in schools. And the matter of the fact is that the parents and students expect you to be there. More and more, they will access your information on sites like Facebook and Twitter rather than remembering to come to your website or to open the newsletters. And of course, you can be more real-time, more dynamic, more engaging. And the truth of the matter is that we've seen this across industries, and certainly in the public sector, it has transformed the way that your agency, your district is perceived. It really changed the dynamic from you being a school district to a building of human beings. Allows you to be authentic and transparent. And that's, as you engage in social media, while there are some risks and challenges we'll talk about, by and large, it's extraordinarily positive and really does move the dynamic in the right direction of parents, students, and educators all working together to support these students as they are educated and they grow. And there's a lot of guidance out there, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we did want to mention this great resource put together by NSPRA. We've adapted it here, but how to think about social media. These are three good columns of principles. So then these explain truth, rightness, and sincerity. They're also the benefits of social media. They give you that opportunity, again, to put truth out there, correct any potential misinformation, get ahead of the rumor mill. If you're not on social media in an active way, your audience is, and they're talking about you and your issues anyway. So social media is your venue to become a part of the conversation and steer towards truth. In terms of rightness, again, this is another version of this. It's really about getting to what right is for your audience, for your parents, for your students, and making sure that they have the information they need. And then the third is sincerity is so important, again, to this point of humanizing your agency, making it collaborative, allowing them to see you as a building of human beings and not just some entity, and really opening up that human dialogue is so important, so much a possibility on social media in a way that it never has been before in other channels. And one quick story that we love to share, and this is actually from a few years ago at this point, hard to believe, 3 years ago, since 2016. Hopefully you all are getting that 9 down when you're signing documents. I'm still working on that myself, but 3 years ago now, this great story that really showed the power of social media in a very positive light. If you hadn't seen the story, it was something that's featured in national news, where in a school system of highly underprivileged families, the school system decided to have seniors walk the halls of the elementary schools in their graduating gowns to really show the next generation of students what's possible and what road they were on in terms of their education, that they would one day be walking down the aisle as graduates. Totally, completely inspiring story, particularly in the region where many of those children grew up in families that did not have that same experience when those parents were younger. And this took off in a really positive way. In fact, it was featured on the Today Show. So a really big story. And what happened here is that this was not only such a feel-good thing, and not only a news article, but it came right back to the social media in a very positive way, created a ton of engagement, effectively went viral. So this is the very positive version of going viral. But as we all know, going viral happens in a lot of different ways and oftentimes not as positive. And so a lot of the presentation here for the remainder is going to focus on the what if it goes in the wrong direction and the resolutions that we have to help you prevent that, so that you can focus most of your time on these types of positive circumstances and generating types of positive circumstances. So with that, I'm going to transition to the 3 New Year's resolutions for your district to make in 2019. And the very first, and this is critical for every district, regardless of what you're doing, but perhaps even more so now with the digital age and the open flow of information, is ensuring oversight. As a district, hopefully you're active on social media. Certainly your schools are, and certainly your schools will get more active. Your parents, the clubs, and of course the teachers getting more and more active on social media. And so as a district, really critical to maintain oversight, because unlike a lot of other forums and channels, social media is 24/7 and it's happening with or without you. And so getting that oversight is really, really important. And oftentimes things can come in where even if they come straight to you, you might not even see it, because of course critical circumstances like to find the best timing on Saturday when you're not around, right, to see it happening. We've seen this happen a bunch of times where crime tips or other challenges will come in, and it'll show up on a district's Facebook page, but rather than the district seeing it for themselves on their own, someone tells them about it. Hey, did you know that showed up on your Facebook page? So a perfect example of this is Beaverton School District, not too long ago, just about a month ago, received actual threats on their Facebook page, and there was ensuing activity around it. And so great news here is Beaverton was quick to respond to it on their social media. And when it comes to oversight, there are various components of oversight for us to drill down to. So starting with which social media accounts are out there. This is a common question that comes up in our conversation with districts. We like to ask, well, how many Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and YouTube accounts and whatever else, Instagram accounts are out there? Are you guys on Pinterest? Are your schools using these channels? And oftentimes the first response is we have no idea how many Facebook pages are out there representing our schools and our districts. And that's not to make you feel bad, it's just a reality of the decentralized nature of school districts and social media. So knowing which accounts are out there, who's actually managing them, and by the way, if that Facebook page is out there, is it still active? Is it being used? Is really important. Of course, in terms of oversight, you want to make sure that all the policies and legal requirements are covered. We'll circle back on this in more detail later, but obvious example is public records compliance and making sure that every use of social media is fulfilling your legal requirements. It's also important to have oversight because questions do come up. Your administrators, your superintendents may say, hey, well, what happened in that situation? What was that feedback we got? Or how did we deal with that person that was upset? And more this is happening on social media. So being able to do that internal review is really, really helpful. You have to have oversight first to enable that. And then, of course, in the stickiest of situations, legal type situations, really strong controversies, records requests, you may actually have internal investigations to conduct. So how do you do that? Well, one great way to do that is to bake it into your policy. And again, we've seen this throughout government in a variety of different sectors of government be a very successful strategy to say, look, there are legal requirements that everybody in this organization has to follow. Hey, schools, all schools in our district, you do have to follow our policies, our legal requirements. And by the way, one of our policies is that if you are going to launch a social media page, that's wonderful, but you need to run it by us first. Justify the need for it, the use case, what you intend to do with it, and have us approve it, and implement this registration process. So that's a really important tip. Easier said than done, but it is absolutely being done, and I encourage you to go down that path to implement a registration process. And there's been a ton of case law, both in government and outside of government, of employees creating social media sites, and then those employees leaving. Maybe it's not an amicable situation, and the employees actually taking the social media sites with them. That's a really bad situation to be in. So again, you want this registration process. Great example that comes out of the Highline Public School District that we work with. We've created a bit.ly here so you can go straight to the registration form and see how this is done. And speaking of Highline, not only do they have this wonderful registration form, but we were so impressed with the work that they do and the way they've grown their social media from humble beginnings to over 100 different social media accounts in a very short time frame. We've actually profiled them in a case study as well. And so again, if you're interested in that, reach out to us, reach out to Stephanie, and we'd be happy to provide that. Now, let me switch gears to another agency that we work with in Virginia, Portsmouth Public Schools. Again, active on Facebook. You can see in this screenshot, and this has grown over 4,000 people liking and following their page. And it's a really healthy segment of the overall audience. But they had this sticky situation come up where a student issued a bomb threat posting on his Facebook page. And individuals decided then to notify the school district by sending private messages on Facebook to the school district. So this really points out again that you have to be cognizant of where the action is happening. And more people's expectation is to be able to reach you and communicate to you on Facebook. They saw it on Facebook, and they're going to send it over to you on Facebook. You might want them to call you or go to your website to fill out a form. That's a higher bar. There's friction of that. People are more likely to engage you on the platform on which they are already active. That's exactly what happened here. And when Portsmouth, the school district, received this information about this bomb threat across Facebook private messaging, they needed to get those records out and get those records to law enforcement. Had they not acted quickly, had they not had the oversight, the people that sent those private messages could have easily changed their mind and deleted them. And what a big loss that would have been, and that would have really perhaps handicapped the investigation. So again, having that oversight, also recognizing that you will receive really critical content on your social media, really important here, and in this case, great success story for them to be able to get that content out of the system with the record keeping and archiving they had in place. All right, so moving on from oversight to our next resolution. Speaking of important content on your page, some of it is really important. Some of it may make you roll your eyes every once in a while, and some of it may make you really concerned. And so there is this issue of keeping your presence clean, making sure that what the public is saying to you is appropriate, and you having some level of control over your page. Now, there's been a lot of news articles about First Amendment and lawsuits around people feeling like their First Amendment is being infringed upon. This is a big deal, and it all comes back to how you deal with that third-party commentary, those messages that you're receiving from the public, parents, citizens, or some random person out in a different part of the country. And again, this is a sticky circumstance. All the reason why you need to think about it right now and get ahead of it. So when it happens, because it will, if it hasn't already, you have a path to address it. And remember that there's all sorts of ways that this happens on social media. Facebook's a really prominent example, but other sites have conversation threads. And then, of course, it's dynamic. People may post something and then edit it, hide it, and so forth, delete it. And so you have to be really careful here. So let me give you some actionable guidance and also another resource here, is to recognize that the forum that you're creating on social media is not a public forum that has no constraints, right? In other words, it's not something where the public can do whatever they want. It is a limited public forum, and that's a legal phrase that has case law behind it that says that you can establish rules for this forum. While it's a public forum, it's limited. You can establish rules and enforce those. And so this comes back to, again, having a great policy, a clear policy, and enforcing it consistently. Again, this is a resource that we did not invent, but we're happy to showcase it. It came out of Wake County, where they created a flow chart for social media managers to help those social media managers enforce the policy they had. The policy is great, but it's in some ways it's legalese and really hard, again, for a distributed team, as you have in school districts, to be consistent. So they humanize this a little bit more for your social media manager, your communicator, and those of us not used to reading policies day in and day out. So you could easily follow a flow chart of when to remove content, when to keep it up on the site. And the big takeaway on this topic when it comes to establishing this policy is to separate the content from opinion. You can absolutely moderate based on the nature of the content. You should never moderate based on opinion. Now, again, I'm giving you guidance. I am not your attorney. You should consult with your attorney, but this is the generally accepted practice across the nation. And let me explain this a little bit. So when I say you can moderate based on content, you can establish rules in your policy, as many public agencies have, that say we prohibit pornography, hate speech, profanity. Any content that's clearly in those categories can and will be removed. That's pretty clear. Opinion, on the other hand, is somebody is criticizing you, right? They're saying the superintendent is doing a terrible job, or I really disagree with this policy that you implemented. It may be really negative, but if it's an opinion, be very careful here. You should stay away from moderating based on the fact that opinion is negative. And as long as they're on topic and they're not violating the content rules, it should probably stay. So be very, very careful of this. So again, all these First Amendment lawsuits you read about, a lot of times it comes down to some public official, elected official, being offended by some criticism, some negative viewpoints, and then moderating based on opinion and not holding that line. So again, check out this resource. We're happy to be a resource to you offline as well on this topic, or in the Q&A later today. Give you some clear guidance, and again, you can use some policies from public agencies that have already crossed this bridge and have figured out how to draw that line. And in terms of the comment moderation guide, that is a resource we have. We also have taken the policy, the legalese part of it that you do need to have, and put it into a policy template for education. Again, we didn't invent this. We went out and looked at the best practices across the country, brought them together as a resource to the industry, and this is complimentary from Archive Social. So again, go check this out, download it, and 2019 is a great time for you to revisit your social media policy and see if it's as bulletproof as you need it to be. All right, and give you a case study out of this topic. This comes out of Evergreen, Washington, and there was a situation where, again, on this Facebook page where they have over 15,000 followers, again, really good engagement. This is a page that people are coming to for information, and it's a site that the school district wants to make sure is professional and it's clean. Well, they had a controversy related to a teacher strike. Obviously a big deal situation, but they got past the situation. But there you have comment thread upon comment thread related to the strike still up on their Facebook page. And the school district really wanted to put this behind them, keep the presence clean, move forward. And so they wanted to remove all this all this commentary around the strike from their Facebook page. And they were able to do that because, of course, in Washington it's public record, but they had record keeping. And so they were able to ensure that their archiving system has the records of all of this back and forth that happened, this controversy. Enough time passed, they could remove this content, have a clean slate, and move forward and ensure, again, a positive interaction with the constituents from then on. So again, a great case study on how you can better control this forum in a way that is most productive for you and your audience. All right, so that's 2 down. 1 is oversight. 2 is ensuring that you're moderating comments in a careful, consistent manner, because that need will come up. And then finally, the 3rd topic circles back on something that I've mentioned a few times in the background, but really is critical to your success as an agency, is ensuring that you're set up to fulfill your public records responsibilities. So for those of you who are not as familiar with social media as a public record, the really easy analogy here is email. Every state in the country has a public records law. It's been in place for decades in your state. And about 20 years ago, email popped up, and initially it started out as kind of this novel channel to maybe send chain jokes and pictures of cats around. And then it quickly became a primary form of communication for each and every business out there. Sound familiar? Well, that's social media, right? We've moved off from cat memes, hopefully. Again, they show up every once in a while. We all still secretly enjoy them. But in reality, more and more social media is front and center. And again, for school districts, for public entities at large, when the news media writes articles, they tend to write articles featuring your tweets and your Facebook posts more than anything else. When they make records requests, they're more and more making records requests for social media content to public sector agencies. And not just journalists, but citizens, advocacy groups, powerful entities more and more recognize social media as a critical channel. And just like email is record, so is social media. There's really no difference between you receiving a complaint from a parent on paper, a complaint from a parent in an email, or a complaint from a parent in a Twitter direct message. It's that content that matters, not the physical form. So you are responsible for complying with public records laws. This is a question that arose in government in general around 2009, 2010. It is matter of fact today that social media generates public records. Now, not everything on your social media is a long-term record, right? I hope you have a great day is not of much long-term value. But again, a bomb threat, yeah, certainly long-term value. Information about student bullying, lockdowns, weather events that you're putting out, clarifications you're putting out in response, information you're receiving from students and parents, a lot of that generates public records that you need to have long-term record keeping for. And the question you have to ask yourself at this moment is, later today you get off this webinar and you receive your first records request for content off your Facebook page from the last 6 months, including anything that's been deleted. How would you respond? You have to be ready to answer that question. And so what I want to spend the rest of the time is giving you some high-level guidance on this. Now, on the public records issue, I know I gave you an overview. For those of you who want more details, well, what are my exact requirements in my state? Are you sure, Anil, that this is a requirement? The answer from me is yes. And the way I can really convince you on that is go to this website, bit.ly/smpublicrecords, click on your state, and see the guidance directly from your state authorities, from the Secretary of State's office, the state archives, whatever it may be in your state who sets the requirements. Most states in the United States have now not only had a public records law, but they've come out in the recent 3 to 5 years to say, and by the way, yes, this public records law does apply to social media just like it applies to email and everything else written. And here's what you need to do in regards to social media retention. So go ahead and check this out if you have more questions about public records. I'll also be happy to answer any questions you have on the topic of public records with the time we have remaining. But let me get into a case study on records requests. And we'll go back to Beaverton School District. Again, an active district when it comes to social media, which means that they are doing great things on social media. They're informing their parents, their students. It's front and center. It's important. Anything that's important then bears risk, given the role that you play in people's lives. So again, there's sort of that two sides of that coin. It's very important. It's something that you're benefiting from. You also need to be prepared for the legal side. You need to be prepared for records requests. And sure enough, in April of last year, Beaverton School District received a public records request related to a school officer program that they had. And again, it's a controversial issue. Obviously, Parkland was a disturbing moment for us as a nation. It sparked a lot of controversy, and there are different viewpoints on this. And so with Beaverton having the school officer program and partnering with law enforcement, there was a lot of concern and controversy around it. And they received records requests, but they had their ducks in order. Not only are they active on social media, but they have put the policies in place and the technology in place to fulfill the requirements. And when they received this records request, they responded to it. And they moved on with using social media. And that's exactly the position you want to be in, rather than an emergency crisis and perhaps a financially draining situation where you're being asked for something that you're not prepared to provide. So what I want to do the last segment here is, in our area of expertise, I can provide you some high-level guidance around social media record keeping. Of course, this is something that we provide, but what I want to do is arm you with different approaches, allow you to judge the level of risk and urgency on your side as a school district, and regardless of what you decide to do, leave today with some action item around public records, oversight, and moderating comments. And so when it comes to record keeping, one thing that one big statement that I want to stick with all of you is that social media is different. It may sound kind of obvious, but a lot of times folks go, yeah, we archive email, we archive our SharePoint files, I'm sure our IT can deal with social media too. The reality is that unlike almost everything else, social media is entirely out of your control. Your email sits in your email server that you control. Your website sits in a website hosting that you control. Your SharePoint, you control it, right? On and on and on. Social media exists on Facebook servers and Twitter servers and YouTube servers. So you may be partaking in social media, but the data sits with them, and while you're sleeping, the conversation's happening. Your parents and students may be commenting, editing, deleting, and you have no control over that. And so you have to remember that. And by the way, not only is this information with a third party, that third party gets to change its mind and make decisions all the time without your consent. The terms of service for these sites has nothing to do with government needs, right? They are oriented around their own goals. They provide a great service to us in society, but they have to generate revenue. And they are constantly introducing new features and making changes, and sometimes there's controversy like the Cambridge Analytica situation that happened last year. The takeaway from this is that not only that are things changing, but you really have no guarantees as a public entity. So social media is different, which means you cannot rely on the social network for your legal record keeping. You cannot assume that this is just done for you. You really need to think about record keeping of social media in a way that you haven't perhaps had to think about keeping records of other content. You may have taken action to retain your email, but that was a far simpler task than archiving and having records of your social media. So I want you to recognize that you can't just go to the social networks for your data because they're not built for record keeping. Lay out that this is a big problem, but I am going to give you some potential solutions here to give you a simpler path. Now, when I talk about this being a big problem, though, and if you're wondering, well, how big of a problem is it? There is a set of studies that we've done. I'll give you one that we ran in 2017. We wanted to really gauge, well, how big of a problem is this? And so we took a sample set of 500 public sector customers. Our technology not only archives, but it detects when content has been deleted as well. And so we used our technology to sample, well, how much is getting deleted off of social media? How much could that really be? Well, in 1 month, as an archiving company, even we were floored. We saw over 200,000 records get deleted off of the social media sites belonging to these 500 customers. That's more than 400 deletions per customer, more than 10 a day in 1 month. And these customers, by the way, some were large entities, like some of the biggest cities we work with, but many were very small. In fact, we had customers under 30,000 in population, these small towns, smaller cities and towns, that had over 100 deleted records in 1 month. And more than 95% of the sample set experienced deletions. So the takeaway here is that this affects everybody, and it can affect you in a big way. Now, if you're wondering, well, how in the world did all this get deleted? Why are they deleting all this content off of their social media? The reality is that if you ask these customers, they'll tell you they don't delete anything. Right? They try not to delete ever. In reality, staff does sometimes delete, but the bigger source of deletions is the other side. The citizens, the parents, the students that are commenting and messaging to you. They can send you a message about a potential bullying incident and then change their mind and delete that comment or delete that private message. And you won't even know that happened. And by the way, they can quit Facebook. When somebody quits Facebook, all of their content gets pulled out due to privacy concerns. So very easy for you to lose this content. And it's not just their content that gets lost when they hit delete. If a citizen or a parent comments on your Facebook thread, and then you continue to then respond to them in reply to that, if they go back and delete their original comment that started it all, it'll pull everything else underneath it away. So all of your replies to their comment will go away too. So a lot of ways the data can be deleted. So again, give you a sense of how big of a problem this is. So how can you solve this? And I mentioned this is a big problem. Try to make the case to you that it is really big with numbers. How do we solve this? Here are three different approaches that we've seen agencies take. One solution for responding to that records request, if you were to get one today, is just to go back to the network. And I've already told you that you can't rely on the social network, so you'll see that first column from a true record-keeping compliance standpoint. We don't give this approach a lot of credit. I will, of course, say if you get a records request today and you have nothing else you can in place for record-keeping, go back to Facebook and try to find it. It may take you a while. Hopefully it's still there. Hopefully at least some of it's still there. A lot of content should still be on Facebook. Hopefully it's what you're looking for, and try to produce it from there. But be wary that Facebook is not a record-keeping store. It's not going to capture deleted content for you. Facebook doesn't keep anything that's deleted. At least publicly, they say they do not keep anything that's deleted. And the search is very limited. So your first option is really take screenshots. Now, this is kind of a bleak picture, but I will tell you that screenshots are viable for overdoing nothing, right? Have some record versus no record. A lot of agencies that we work with today started out recognizing that public records public records are a big issue, and in their use of social media, they would take screenshots whenever they deemed that there was risk. So, for example, if they saw controversy erupting, they would start taking screenshots. If they decided they were going to delete or hide something, they would take a screenshot. Now, what a lot of agencies found, though, is that you can't really time in legal situations and risk situations, you can't really time it around your own needs. What you may not even think is a big issue suddenly becomes an issue, and it crops up 6 months later. So a lot of these agencies then move from screenshotting every now and then to just actively screenshotting all the time, spending 20, 30, 40 hours a month as a communicator screenshotting social media just in case. And so when you think about this method, you may get some kind of record, but it's not a very searchable record. How do you search screenshots? It may feel like it's free because you're not paying for anything, but you're paying for it with your time. And then ultimately, if you were to go to court with these records, how good are they? Anyone can challenge you and say, well, how do I know that's not Photoshopped, right? So there is limited value here, but if you have nothing in place, I would strongly encourage you at least to take a screenshot when you see something that's problematic. But long term, it's important to think about archiving software. Now, this is a broad bucket of different kinds of tools, software out there to either back up or truly archive your social media. So I want to give you some guidance around what to look for. You really need to look for starting with real-time capture. Social media is dynamic, and I mentioned to you that the data can be deleted at any time. So if it can be deleted at any time, you really want to minimize that window and get it in your hands as soon as possible. Near real-time means seconds or minutes. It's unfortunately not technically possible to get all content in real time from all networks, but technology does exist to get it within seconds or minutes, and you should look for it. You want to really pay attention to the deletions, the edits, the hides, whether you're doing that or the other side of the conversation is. Many of the records requests that we receive are in relation to deleted content, where citizens saying, hey, look, I feel like my First Amendment is being violated. Now I'm issuing a records request for the last 6 months. Show me everything that's being deleted or hidden because I'm about to file a lawsuit and I want to see if I've been singled out. We see that records request quite frequently. So you want to look for a technology solution that's tracking that for you, and then if and when you receive a records request around deleted or hidden content, you can immediately respond to it and produce it. Metadata is a really important topic here. I won't get too deep unless folks have questions on it in the Q&A, but essentially it's the data behind the data. So if you're looking at a tweet, it may look like 140 characters or 280 characters, but there's more than 2,000 characters of metadata about who posted it, what was the time frame, what location were they at, what Twitter client did they use. That information can come up in the public record, is part of legal discovery. So you want to make sure you have that underlying data. This is data that does not get captured in a screenshot, so be wary of that with screenshotting. Of course, searchability of the content is critical. You want to be able to search across a variety of factors, particularly topic and time frame, but as well as conversation participants. A lot of the records requests we receive are related to specific individuals. You need to be able to find those comments and that content very quickly. And then last but not least is you can have all of this data, but if you have a records request later today, and you have to piecemeal that data back yourself, you may not be that well positioned to actually respond to a records request. What you need is a approach that'll allow you to instantly recombine and reconstruct the social media conversations. Let me give you an example of, okay, well, so I don't have that here, but I'll give you an example of that. In terms of social media, when you do a records request search, which our customers do encounter, we have dozens upon dozens of case studies with our customers on this. It's typically going to span across your social media presence. So you might do a search and it'll match some Facebook comments, it'll match some tweets, it'll match some YouTube content, it'll match some private messages, and all that's mixed up and jumbled up in a list of search results. When you're responding to that records request, you cannot just send that list over of jumbled up comments and messages, because someone's going to say, well, what's this comment related to? What conversation did it belong to? How does this comment relate to the other comment that's 5 results below it? And how is that related to this tweet in the middle, right? So you need an approach that can reconstruct and combine the comments back into the conversations they belong to, show some of the surrounding context of here's the other comments that were there. They may not be directly the keywords that you were searching for, but you need to see them to understand your search results. You need technology that pieces that back together for you in an easy way. And so again, archiving software does exist to do that. Not all of it does it that way though. So an important criteria for you to look at. Most importantly, you need to be able to respond to a records request if and when it happens. And again, we are seeing records requests happen more and more. We gave you the example from Beaverton. Certainly throughout the public sector, it's become very common for folks to either ask for social media content or ask for something like a school communications related to the school closure that inherently involves social media. So even if they don't ask for Facebook records, if you communicated about the school closure on Facebook, you should respond with Facebook content. What's great about social media archiving and compliance over the other forms that I talked about, I mentioned social media is challenging from a technology standpoint, but again, the technology from a technical standpoint, the technologies out there that would make this simple is that when it gets to archiving social media, it's all cloud-based, and our average customer sets up archiving and has their entire presence covered in under 20 minutes. And so again, in the archiving space, this software being cloud-based makes it a lot easier than traditionally archiving email or other types of content. And you generally don't need any kind of help from IT or any other resources. It gives you that centralized oversight as well, so you can fulfill a legal requirement with your record keeping. At the same time, having everything in one archive is oversight. In fact, that registration process I talked about, one of the requirements there could be when you register your social media account, you have to do this because we have to make sure you're archiving for records compliance. That's a real trigger for folks to finally go through that process with you, because they don't want to be responsible for those public records without your help. You're the district, you have the archiving software, they'll register their accounts more willingly with you so that you'll help them cover the public records needs, and then as a side effect, you get oversight of their social media page because now it's in the archive. And by the way, the pricing on this stuff being cloud-based is something that I can dive into in Q&A if folks are interested. It's surprisingly affordable, typically a discretionary spend. The average agency district is under $5,000 annual, just to give you a price point there. So something to look into in terms of archiving software to legitimately ensure compliance and protect your district. So with that, I'm going to summarize and make sure we have plenty of time here for questions. Social media is a must for your district and your schools. There's no question about it. It is as something so important to you and your parents and your students, it also is subject to all of your requirements, including public records laws and the potential for legal discovery. And you can't just sit back, whether you're in communications or IT or legal administration. Do something about the topics we talked about today. Do something about oversight. Do something about monitoring comments, and of course, do something about public records compliance. You have to take action. You can't sit back and rely on the social networks. And truth be told, for those of you in communications, most of the work we do starts with a communicator being involved because you're the front line of social media. You're the one that understands the value of social media the most. So almost all instances where we work with school districts and public entities involves the communicator and often starts with the communicator. And on the record keeping topic, wanted to mention, we pointed out the guidance from NSPRA previously. We're really excited to partner with NSPRA on a variety of different angles. One facet of our partnership this past year was to develop a really in-depth guide to social media record keeping for school districts. Again, this is a free resource that we've created for the industry, something we'd be happy to share with you. Feel free to reach out to Stephanie. You can just respond to the webinar invite, and we'll be more than happy to get you this piece of content, this in-depth ebook that Archive Social and NSPRA jointly developed. And then last but not least, I'm of course here to answer some questions for you, but we often get outreach from districts and other agencies that say, okay, hey, I've got a one-on-one question for you. Tell me about the public records requirement in my state. Again, I'm reading the page that you pointed me to. I'm reading the guidance from the Secretary of State. Help me understand that. What is the real requirement there, and how does it impact the way I'm currently using Facebook? Some folks reach out to us and say, okay, you're mentioning record keeping, public records compliance. It seems like something everybody should be doing. Am I the only one not doing this? Who else is doing this? You're not the only one not archiving, but there are a lot of school districts out there, a lot of public agencies. We work with more than 1,800 agencies now archiving social media. So we'd be more than happy to give you a reference near and around you so you can talk to them about their experience with archiving. And then last but not least, if you're wondering, well, how urgent of a problem is this? Anil, you mentioned records requests. I've never heard of a records request for social media. Again, we see dozens upon dozens of records requests for social media content, legal situations. We'd be more than happy to inform you of records requests that may have happened in your county, in your state, near you. These are a lot of situations that are not in the news because the agencies we work with are able to respond to the records requests and avoid lawsuits, avoid controversy, so they never become news items. But we have a lot of these stories that we can share with you to help you understand the application of the information today to your social media. If any of this is interesting to you, I'm going to put a poll up on the screen. We'd be more than happy to schedule a brief call. This call will not be about our product. It will be about you and your records requirements, you and archiving, the agencies around you, helping you get connected with that, understanding the legal requirements, understanding the legal case studies or records requests, help you determine if this is an issue you want to address. If any of that's interesting to you, please go ahead and pick the option here. This is an optional poll, and I'll be happy to have a member of my team reach out to you. And with that, Stephanie, I'll hand back to you. Happy to take some questions here.
Great. Thanks, Anil. That was really full of a lot of good educational material. And I really encourage everyone, if you have any questions for Anil, anything about anything he talked about, he mentioned metadata. He mentioned a lot of things that he said he could circle back to in the Q&A. So if you have any questions at all, go ahead and put them in the chat window. And we do have some questions here that I will go ahead and start with. So number one, this is a question about posts being public. And this question wants to know, if posts are public and are not being deleted on social media, is there still a need for additional archiving?
So if the content is still on social media and has not been deleted, you can go and point someone to that content. Absolutely. You can point them to it. You may not be able to get to that metadata. There have been case studies around, public records case studies around metadata. That's a little bit of a challenge. It can be a challenge. It can be a big challenge depending on the circumstance. In most cases, you can point somebody at that content. But the key in that question is if it hasn't been deleted, you have no control of that, unfortunately. So as you're using social media and you're having hundreds upon hundreds or thousands upon thousands of interactions over the course of a few months and now a few years, and now you have 20,000 communications over the past 2 years, something is being deleted, something's being edited. Without question, a citizen is quitting Facebook or deleting their content. And so it all comes back to the recognition that in the mix of things, there's enough content being deleted that you won't be able to go back and point to it on social media. The social networks won't help you, and that's certainly where archiving comes into place.
Great. And then this looks like a follow-up question to that original question. So this question wants to know, so even after a post is deleted, hidden, edited, Archive Social does have a record of the original post.
Absolutely, and that's really the value we provide in conjunction with that first question. If that content was just there on Facebook and it could never be lost, and Facebook had a mandate to support public records needs, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be working with the volume of agencies we work with today. But we have to be there to get that content before it's deleted, as it's edited, and ensure that we have all the different versions of that content. That's exactly what we do. We know a lot of folks, when it comes to moderating content, choose to hide. That's really important that while that should still be on Facebook, it's really important that you have a record of when it was public versus when it was hidden, right? That does come up. And again, it could get deleted later on without your knowledge. So we do track content. We capture it quickly in near real time, and then we track it. One of the unique aspects of what we do is we track the fact that it was hidden, the fact that it got deleted later or it got edited with a version history. Because again, a lot of records requests we see are for, give me all the content across all your social media in the last 6 months that was deleted or hidden or edited. right? And so that is the core of our service. I appreciate you asking that.
Okay, great. And I think just to piggyback on that, another sort of related question, are pictures, specifically pictures in posts, also archived?
Yes, and that's a great point in that question, that it's not just about text on social media. There's high resolution imagery, and there are videos, and there are even live stream videos. We, in our system, across all the social networks we support, we get all that information in full resolution, the highest resolution available, because it is critical to the record. Pictures 1,000 words, a video, a streaming video, I'm not really sure how many words that is, but it's quite important. And on that point, social media continues to evolve. And so 2-3 years ago, Facebook Live and Periscope were fairly new. That streaming video is something that gets posted on Facebook, but the video keeps going, and it's not done until it's done. It's a real challenge in the archiving space. So when you look at options out there, you should vet that because it is a technological hurdle. Not every approach to archiving will capture that live streamed video. So you should look for the capture of not only photos and resolution, not only videos, but even live stream videos. And of course, as social networks come out with new features, the archiving vendors like us need to be able to keep up with that and ensure that we have the full record for you.
Okay, great. And I know, Anil, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the presentation with the map and the link to the records, state pages, but there's a question here about if you could talk a little bit more about the specific laws that state school districts must archive their social media.
Sure, and again, each state has its own public records law. If you're in Texas, you have the Public Information Act. If you're in Washington, you have the Public Records Act. In Florida, Public Records Law. And in New Jersey, that's the Right to Know. That's OPRA. Pennsylvania's Right to Know. Right, and so they all have these different names, but at the core, they're virtually the same. They have the same foundation, which all comes out of the Federal Freedom of Information Act. What would be best is if offline we could reach out to you, talk to you about your state and walk through the guidance with you. So again, that poll we put up, if you missed that, go ahead and send Stephanie an email. We can walk through it one-on-one with you. But in general, you should know that these laws exist in every state. And then you should also know that in every state, in many states, the records bodies have further interpreted the laws, recognizing that there is early on there was some open questions about, well, does social media fit into the Texas Public Information Act? Well, in Texas, in 2013, they updated the act with a Senate bill to list internet posting as an example. Then the Texas State Libraries and Archives Commission put out guidance detailing social media as a record, in what cases it becomes a public record and what you must do about it. Similarly, in California, for many years we had questions back and forth. Well, are you sure that social media needs to be retained under the California Public Records Act? Well, the Records and Information Management Office in California, called CalRIM, put out an ebook about 3 years ago now that in detail walks through, here is when social media becomes a record. When it's unique information that's not posted elsewhere, or if it is posted elsewhere and it's on social media but you receive commentary on it, right? Or if it has XYZ, right? So look for that kind of content. You can certainly look at our map, but probably the best thing for us to do, we could shortcut this, is we'll hop on the phone. Again, we'll talk about you and your requirements and walk you through the specific guidance in your state.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. And one of the questions we have from Sarah is, what is the cost structure for Archive Social?
Well, I'm glad you asked. And again, I'll try to refrain from too much into our product on this line in respect of everyone's time here, and would love to talk to you more specifically about your pricing. But for everyone to know, as a company that provides software for transparency, we are extraordinarily transparent. And if you go to archivesocial.com, you can click on the pricing tab and see that cost structure. Again, 90% of public agencies for us fall under $5,000 annual. It is really our intent to make this a discretionary spend so that you can be proactive and get this up and running at any time throughout the year. We're very flexible in terms of the invoicing structure, we'll prorate and so forth. But basically, it comes down to the volume of social media you have. So if you're up and running, you've got some pages, your schools are using it within the district, and you're generating a few thousand records a month, you may fit in our standard plan. If you're highly engaged and you have a pretty sophisticated social media presence, we might put you in a higher tier. If you're just getting started, you might be in a lower tier. It really comes back to how valuable is social media to you, how much communication is happening on a month-to-month basis, and that's the cost of Archive Social. We tie our purpose to the value you're getting out of us and our pricing to it. And again, all we do is work in public sector. So just for those of you who are wondering about the volume, It's a tier that we generally want to place you in. With public agencies, in a controversy or a shooting or something like that, your social media will spike tremendously. We do not charge overages or anything like that. That's where you need us the most. In fact, a good example of that is the city of Orlando obviously had a tragic circumstance a few years back with the Pulse nightclub shooting. And the night of the shooting, they put out a tweet saying all phone calls and emails over Twitter, no phone calls and emails, all updates over Twitter, please. And they use social media in an incredible fashion to communicate and be transparent during this crisis. The city of Orlando called us the next day and said, "Hey, are you guys gonna? What's the archiving situation? Like, we're way over our records plan." And we were like, all we said was, "Please hang up the phone. Don't worry about this. We know you're 14 times over your plan. That's exactly why we're here, is to protect you. That doesn't affect your pricing one bit." And so again, our mentality here is to proxy the value you're getting from us, price accordingly, and make this a really easy win for you.
That's great. Thanks, Anil, for that explanation. And I think that's all we have time for today, but I think this has been a great presentation. And thanks, everyone, for coming. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me via email just by responding to the webinar invitation. And this will also be recorded and sent to you as well. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.